Welcome back to The Beat with Ari Melber. We have been covering a story that broke in the Washington Post late this afternoon. Reports that Rod Rosenstein, while he was overseeing the Mueller probe, was privately, secretly back-channeling to Trump, assuring him he was not a target of the probe and leaving Donald Trump with the impression that Rosenstein was, quote, on Trump's team. What will Congress do about this kind of information? Well, I'm joined right now by a member of the House Judiciary Committee, Congressman David Cicilline. Thanks for joining me. Your reaction to this news?
My pleasure. Well, this is obviously very explosive reporting. Rod Rosenstein, a lot of us wondered why he didn't recuse himself initially, because he was a witness, really, in the Jim Comey firing. We thought it was odd that he wasn't fired after that reporting was revealed that he talked about the 25th Amendment. Now I think we have a better understanding. Here's someone who was trying to please the president, trying to reassure the subject, or at least, if not the target, the subject of an ongoing investigation. Completely inappropriate. And I think it's an example, again, of the power of the president to really corrupt these Department of Justice officials who take an oath to the Constitution. They don't take an oath to the president. We saw what happened to Jeff Sessions when he refused to cave to that. I think Matt Miller's right. I think Rod Rosenstein turns out to have been a weak person. He wasn't able to stand up to the president to maintain the independence of the department, if this reporting is true. And that's very disappointing. It raises lots of questions about the decisions he made, first to stand with the Attorney General at a press conference where he observed him misrepresenting facts to the American people about the report. He added his name to the letter, that 4-page summary, which misled the American people about the special counsel's conclusions. So it raises a lot of questions about what was shared with the president, what promises were made to the president, what did he say to convince the president he was on the president's team. I wish instead he could have said, look, I'm on the team of the people of this country and the Constitution, Mr. President. I cannot discuss an ongoing investigation with you, but he didn't do that. You have to wonder, why was he so desperate to keep his job rather than to stand up to the president and maintain the independence of his position and of the Department of Justice?
I think we can actually put up on the screen for demonstration what you mentioned, because that press conference with Mr. Barr and Rosenstein was just 8 days ago. It may feel to some Americans like ancient history by now, but as you say, the report is still being processed by your committees and others. The press conference there between Barr and Rosenstein was a presentation to the American public, and we're looking here on our screens at Rosenstein during the presser. There was a lot of commentary about this being his sort of final chapter, some alleging that he looked pained or like almost a quote-unquote hostage. He spoke about this last night, actually, and addressed it and has said, what was he supposed to do? His job was just to stand there. Do you think that ultimately it is important to your congressional inquiries in the House to get to the bottom of how Mueller was overseen and whether there was undue pressure on him based on what we're learning? Or do you view this as ancillary or in the rear view of your probes?
Oh, no, this isn't ancillary at all. This goes to the central question of whether or not the Department of Justice supervision by Rod Rosenstein in particular in any way shaped this investigation, shaped the conclusions that Mr. Mueller drew, or shaped the collection of any evidence. So I think as a result of this reporting, we have more questions, not less. And it gets back to this central issue. Congress has a responsibility to follow the facts wherever they lead us, to get the full report from Mr. Mueller, to hear from all of the witnesses who contributed to evidence contained in that report, so we can make an informed judgment about next steps. The president has indicated his intention to block or try to impede congressional oversight. We're going to have to litigate some of this, but the committee is determined to get to the facts. No one in this country is above the law, including the president, and we're going to do whatever is necessary to get information and testimony under oath from witnesses so we can make these determinations fully informed.
As you mentioned earlier, there was this account of this being desperation, that Rosenstein was trying to clean up what had been reported out in the New York Times about, as you mentioned, the prospect of the 25th Amendment and the prospect of wearing a wire, which he did not do. There's no report that he did that. But he's not, it turns out from our reporting, and I think you probably know, sir, he's actually not the only long-serving law enforcement official who thought that Donald Trump's attempts to cultivate him were so inappropriate that he considered either defying Trump and not even talking to him. That's one way. Or when calling him back, when getting in touch, wiretapping or taping or recording him in some way. Preet, who was ultimately dismissed, confirmed that to me in his own separate case. Take a look.
We actually considered, and it sounds not as crazy as it did back then, because now we know about Michael Cohen recording the president and Omarosa recording the president. We considered, and we have this competing.
You considered what?
Taping the president in that phone call.
You considered recording the president if you had called him back?
Yeah.
What does it tell you that so many seasoned and, I should say, nonpartisan officials were considering those measures?
Well, it says what the report reveals, that the president was directing people to do things that they knew were either unethical, improper, or maybe illegal. He was fortunate that most of the time they didn't do it, and that's how he was saved. But the idea that they felt the need to record him says something about what they believed about the president's instructions, that they weren't appropriate. But, you know, what we need is people to stand up in those moments and defend the rule of law, defend the Constitution, defend the independence of the Department of Justice. And I think what Rod Rosenstein did, if it's true, that reporting is incredibly disappointing.
And David Cicilline, do you view, as a final question, yes or no, the likelihood that the House will have impeachment hearings is yes, it's likely, or no, it's unlikely?
Well, we're going to have hearings immediately that will help us answer the question about whether or not we should proceed with impeachment if the evidence supports it. But we're going to have a series of hearings. We're going to bring in the witnesses who provided testimony to the special counsel. Interestingly, Ari, they're not 12 angry Democrats. It turns out most of the evidence contained in that special counsel report comes from the president's own administration officials or former officials. So I think it's important we hear the context of their testimony, it be under oath, so that we can make an informed judgment.
Well, sir, not to make light of it, but you read the footnotes of the Mueller report, and it's like a cross between a MAGA rally and a CPAC panel.
Yeah, I mean, if it weren't so serious and if the consequences of it weren't so grave and if it weren't such attack on the rule of law and on our Constitution, it would be funny, but it's not, and we're going to approach it in a very serious way. But we have a lot of evidence collection to do. We need to see the full report. We need to see all the supporting materials, and we need to hear from these witnesses under oath before the committee so the American people can also understand exactly what has happened.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.